Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. My name is Christina. This is a reading for Cancer Suns, or if you just have Cancer anywhere in your chart and you're needing to work with or balance masculine energies within yourself, then this reading is for you. So Cancer, I've pulled your cards already. Let's start with the bottom of the deck. So you have a lot of sort of like earthy energies in your spread today. So I feel like that's just talking about that whatever this message is about, it's something in your very physical environment or somebody, or like it could be related to work as well. I'm getting that as well. So there may be somebody in your work environment or related to you through work that is significant today. So the first three cards to come out, these were at the bottom of the deck for the archetypes. The Sustainer, which is talking about like your physical environment or something that you're trying to maintain, like some sort of daily routine, which is why I'm kind of saying like work related. The Gnosis card and the Vision. And I feel like what this is talking about, it's like sustaining some sort of vision of yours, right? Like something like a goal that you're trying to achieve or whatever it is. And with this Gnosis, I feel like it's like getting some sort of like new insight about a situation that you're in. And you have here the Ace of Pentacles and the Page of Pentacles. So again, more earthy energy. So a new start or like something new or like a new inspiration or a new insight. And with the Page of Pentacles, I feel like this is talking about it's giving you something new to work with in some way. And there's also this little dragonfly at the top there. So I feel like which comes in later, which is why I'm mentioning it. So I will come back to this, but I feel like you're very much in this page energy where you're getting some sort of new insight or perhaps like a new thing to work with, like something physical with the Sustainer card, like molding something, right? Shaping something, and allowing it to grow is kind of how this is coming through. And then finally you have here the Sea Serpent and the Earthworm, which I absolutely adore. The Sea Serpent talks about this sort of knowingness and the ability to sort of create is kind of what this is talking about with like your vision, right? It's in line with your vision, what it is that you, like your goal or whatever it is, your desires, all of that. And the Earthworm is such an interesting energy because it is this sort of like beginning stage, but it kind of seems there's been like some sort of unexpected hiccup or like a kink in the energy that you're needing to untangle. But once you untangle that energy, like things move again is kind of how this is coming through. So we're going to start with your current energy, and your energy came out today as the Comic, which is really lovely because I feel like it's talking about this sort of like, it was coming through as like comic relief. Like I feel like you, Cancer, are actually providing some sort of relief for somebody else is kind of how this is feeling. Like not necessarily through comedy or like jokes or anything like that. It could be that, but it's more so feeling just more of like a lighthearted, playful energy or like teasing or something like that, right? It's like there's somebody in your environment, perhaps related to work, that you are providing this sort of like comic relief from whatever it is that they're going through. Or just like a lightheartedness or a playfulness. And what's interesting here, so to continue on with your energy, you have the Bee, which is absolutely lovely. I talk about this as sort of like finding joy and sweetness and happiness and fulfillment in the sort of work that you're doing, or just your everyday life. Like your energy feels very sort of upbeat, like productive, enjoying what it is that you're doing, even if it's sort of like a very simple thing. And then here you have the High Priestess and the Nine of Pentacles. So that Nine of Pentacles is all of that sort of like abundance, with all of this gorgeous yellow energy, which is just talking about like I feel like you're just like a happy sort of bright light in somebody's life is kind of how it's feeling. But it's coming out with the High Priestess today, which is interesting because I feel like this is talking about you have a specific knowing, or like there's some sort of connection between you and source, of course, that is allowing you to see things that perhaps is not visible on the surface, is kind of how this is coming through, because there's somebody here in your environment. Sorry, just dropped a card. There's somebody here in your environment who's coming through with this energy. So the orphan, the fault line, and the medallion. So I'll get back to the medallion in a second, but the fault line I was seeing as kind of like putting something under the microscope. But it was also coming through with this energy of like how all of California basically is built atop a fault line. There's some sort of unsteadiness, or like for example, there's many reasons why I would not live in California, but one of them is because of the fault line. It's almost like they're on edge. There's somebody in your environment who's like on edge or uncomfortable, or just like living in this energy of like constantly expecting like an earthquake, is kind of how this is feeling, right? They're feeling very unsteady, is kind of how I'm going to put this with the orphan. So that energy talks to me about like in need of something. And I feel like you, Cancer, are providing this in some way. So you have the star here, which I'm going to bring up with the dragonfly, because the dragonfly wings. The dragonfly to me represents sort of like a very significant spiritual connection. And when that happens, there's sort of like these signs and synchronicities that are sort of revealed to you in relation to a specific person. And I feel like for you to come out with the star, this is actually coming out with like sort of like your magic gift, like something about you that like some ability that you have, perhaps just like your insight or intuition with the high priestess, or something about like work, like your work or your knowledge, or some ability, like perhaps it has to do with like your hands, right? Like what it is that you put your hands in, with the earthworm as well. All of this like really earthy energy. But this of course is air. But what this is talking about is that I feel like there's somebody in your environment. They're coming through with the King of Pentacles, right? This is the fault line energy. You can see how they're standing on antlers, right? A very sort of potentially I don't want to say the word dangerous, but that's kind of the only word that's coming through. Potentially risky position is kind of how this is feeling. In terms of perhaps their finances, or where it is that they've like settled in, right? They're on this sort of like fault line. They've built their house on a fault line in some way, whatever that means for you. And I feel like for you, Cancer, there's, with this medallion, it's like if you're sort of working with each other, I feel like it's like you don't know them yet, or perhaps you do. Perhaps it's somebody like very close to you. But with this medallion, it's kind of feeling like they've given you a gift of some sort or something. There's been some sort of like exchange of resources or something like that. Like somebody has given you a gift, whoever this King of Pentacles is, or given you something very tangible, like that Ace of Pentacles energy, giving you something, and once they give that thing to you, it's like you can suddenly see something about them that you didn't see before, is kind of how this is feeling, right? Like I was getting sort of like those stories. I don't know if there are actually people who can do this. I wonder if there is, but those stories where like people, they're like I guess like psychics of some sort who can touch an object and then sort of know the history or the background or like a significant story behind it. That's sort of what I'm getting with this energy I keep wanting to say Capricorn, so they may actually be a Capricorn. But for you, Cancer, it's like they've given you something, and through that, through your interaction with this thing that they've given you, it's unlocking some sort of like intuition about them that you haven't seen before, because there is a very sort of strong connection between the two of you. And what's so interesting about that is that you have here the Nine of Swords and the Queen of Wands. So you're this Queen of Wands character, and with this peacock tail, I was thinking of this drawing that I saw on Instagram where there's a peacock and all of the sort of feathers had human eyes, right? So instead of the peacock, like the eye of the feather, it was actual human eyes. So I feel like Cancer, it's like you with this sort of light are being able to see something about this other one where it's suddenly like they're feeling exposed, is kind of how this is coming through. Like, because it's coming through with the dragonfly, right? Like it's always sort of reciprocal. It's like if you're seeing signs about this person, then they are also receiving signs or insights about you. But it's like, so they can tell now that they've given you this gift or whatever it is. They've given you some sort of token, I want to say, is exposing them in some way that's making them feel a bit uncomfortable, right? Because they're suddenly like seen by you, is kind of how this is feeling. However, even though it is making them perhaps uncomfortable, you have here the moth here, which is coming out next, which is so incredible. You have 3 insect cards with this Queen of Wands. Like, I'm always saying that she's like shining light on the insects. So it could be, again, something that's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel necessarily like a pleasant insight, right? Because it feels like, especially because it's the King of Pentacles, it feels like something where they've tried to like actively perhaps try to like mask, because they are at a distance, right? It's something that they didn't want sort of everyone to know, or something like that. Perhaps something like that. I'm not sure. But then here, what you have next is the Knight of Cups and the Four of Swords, where it's kind of like, I'm seeing you as the Knight of Cups, Cancer, where it's like, I feel like you to some extent know that you've sort of exposed some aspect of them that they perhaps were not wanting to have exposed, is kind of how this is feeling. So it's kind of like with this Knight of Cups is like trying to put them at ease, right? With this like almost like serenading this one, like perhaps just like changing your energy to be a bit more that's the thing. It's like you're already open, right? It's like you're open and you're just like very much doing your thing. I feel like it wasn't even sort of an intentional kind of exposure, is just kind of what I'm going to say. It wasn't sort of an intentional digging. I feel like it was more so like you just received some sort of insight about them, and through that exchange, they realized that you could see them. It's kind of how it's coming through. And so now this energy is kind of like trying to put this one back at ease, with the Nine of Swords, right? That kind of talks about like nightmares. To me, for today, just feeling more so like just discomfort at being seen, whereas the Four of Swords is more so like peaceful and at rest. So I feel like that's the current energy. So you're having this like sort of strange insight or intuition about a particular person, and what you need to know here, you have here next the Village and the Panther, where it's kind of like, and also the Three of Swords, which is all of the other person's energy. So it kind of feels like in your sort of understanding of what this person is going through, I feel like they are also now seeing something about themselves or the fault line, right? The area of sort of instability upon which that they've built a significant part of their identity or their stability or whatever it is. Because you have here the elk that comes next, right? The elk, just in contrast to the King of Pentacles, where it kind of feels like, why am I holding so many cards? It kind of feels like some aspect of it where it was like, I feel like in seeing them or in sort of identifying this fault line, whatever that is, it's actually gotten them to come down off of this shakiness, this area of risk, right? They've removed themselves from that area, because the village I see is like a place that you're leaving. So I feel like there's some aspect where perhaps you've had a conversation about this. It feels very much, because it's coming through with the dragonfly, it actually feels very sort of like non-verbal, non-confrontational. It just feels very sort of like a spiritual, intuitive link between the two of you, where it's kind of, especially with the moth as well, very sort of like psychic realm where I don't even think you've perhaps even said anything, Cancer, but it's kind of like, because you know this about them, they also know that you know. And it's actually causing this sort of movement here with them, right? It's like because the panther I always see is sort of like an expression of fear, right? So I don't think necessarily that there's been any sort of tower moment yet. Perhaps it more so feels like, in order for them to avoid a potential catastrophe, right, they've decided to move house, or like change some aspect, move away from the fault line, the area of risk, so that there isn't a tower moment, is kind of how this is feeling. And they're realizing here with the 10 of Wands, because this it's like carrying a lot of burden. Perhaps they are actually having to like move in some way, or there's some aspect of their stability that's shifting, and it's kind of like having to carry all of their belongings to a place that's much more safe and stable, is kind of how this is feeling, right? Like having to actually make some sort of shift or change. And I feel like for you, Cancer, there's almost a bit of like shyness or timidness, because you have here the 2 swords and the mystic, right? It's like the mystic is you, absolutely. Like you've identified some sort of area in their life that was needing change, but perhaps they couldn't see it, or they didn't want to see it, or well, of course, it's an area of pain, right? It's like, I feel like they weren't expecting anyone to be able to notice what this is. And so for the 2 of Swords, I feel like it's kind of like you're giving them privacy, is kind of how this is feeling, right? Like covering your eyes in some way with the High Priestess, because perhaps you're feeling like your insight caused discomfort for them. And so now trying to almost like close your eyes or give this one privacy is more so how it's feeling, right? Like the cards that are coming out for this are the 5 of Wands, which I was seeing as kind of like, you know, when people like anxiously kind of like rearrange their furniture or like start like tinkering with things in their environment when there's like an awkward situation in the room, right? Like just sort of fidgeting, like fixing your belongings so that you can give the other one sort of time and space to adjust, is kind of how this is feeling. So I feel like that's what you're doing, Cancer. But I do feel that this was appreciated by them, is kind of how this is feeling, because you do have the 6 of Swords and the Ace of Swords. Sorry, yeah, the 6 of Swords and the Ace of Swords. So I do feel that like right now they may be going through this transition period where they're having to like move or do something else, or like find a safer or better place to rest their head, is kind of what I just heard. So like I talk about the Six of Swords as sort of like having a bit of turbulence on the journey, but it's like there is land ahead. And I feel like because it's coming out with the Ace of Swords, it's like you did help them sort of unlock whatever this kink in their energy was, because I feel like for you, Cancer, it wasn't a kink in your energy, but because this one is in your work environment, right? Like perhaps you're working on a project together, and it's like the project, the actual thing that you're working on together wasn't moving forward because this one had a kink in their energy. So the whole thing was kind of compromised. And so you identified what this kink was, and it happened to be something that was related to where they were standing, is kind of how this is feeling. And so it's kind of just like they're understanding that truth, recognizing that, and making some sort of change. And I feel like in the meantime, because you have this Five of Swords, right? Which I always see sort of like a really dark energy, but today it's more so coming out because the general energy of your reading is very lighthearted, right? It's this one after they've sort of removed the Three of Swords, and it's kind of like just needing like time and space to recover. And so it's kind of like you're just giving them privacy or space or whatever it is, especially with the moon coming out next. I'm seeing this as like, if you're like like in the same room with someone and they're having to like change their clothes, right? It's like just turning your back for a moment just so that they can have a moment of privacy, is kind of how this is feeling. But then you have here the Seed, which is absolutely gorgeous. Is the Gnosis card a seed as well? No, that's not. But this is talking about like the wisdom, right? I feel because even though it is coming through with the Three of Swords, which talks about a heartbreak energy, because it's coming in with the Village, I feel like it is something that they've already sort of left behind, right? It's like with this Orphan King of Pentacles, it feels kind of like a rags to riches story. So it could be that right now they're like the person that you know, the person that you interact with daily is very sort of stable and has gathered a lot of abundance or success, like found a lot of abundance and success because of perhaps they started off in a position that was not that, right? Like they grew up in an environment that was not very abundant. And so using that sort of like coming from this aspect of sort of the rags aspect and then working themselves up to riches, they very much have already done a lot of work in terms of healing whatever this energy is, because the Village just talks about something that's past. It's not really a present energy, is kind of how this is feeling. So it's kind of just like with what I'm seeing with this Five of Swords is kind of just like removing a really old kind of like ideal, perhaps like a belief system or like a pattern of behavior that came from whatever this like orphan energy was, right? Like it could just be a mindset of lack is often how I see the orphan. But it's like they're quickly getting the seed or the pearl of wisdom from whatever the situation is, because I feel like they still very much are the King of Pentacles. But what's interesting here is that you have the Knight of Pentacles. So it's kind of like when they are done sort of like moving or whatever it is that they're doing, like shifting gears is kind of how it's feeling. They are sort of starting again with the Knight of Pentacles. So much Pentacles in your reading today. But because this Knight of Pentacles is sort of made of plants, it does feel a bit more slow going. But because they've already done this to some extent, right? They've already built up a home. it just was built on an incorrect or risky foundation. It's kind of how it's feeling. So now it's like they're moving to a place where the foundation is more stable and secure, right? Not building their home on a fault line. But it is kind of like slow and steady, right? Slow and steady. Because you do have the fish here, which does talk about sort of like a long journey kind of energy, or just like a solo journey, like something they're having to do on their own. But I always see good luck with this fish is that they are absolutely going to find success in this sort of rebuilding stage. And then finally, what you have here, which is interesting, is Thanatos, which is talking about sort of like a death rebirth. But I was seeing with this card, the scene in Lord of the Rings, where Frodo sort of gets stuck in like the spider's web, right? Like he gets wrapped up in a cocoon. And Sam, which is being played by you today, Cancer, is the one who sort of goes in and pulls Frodo out of this potentially dangerous situation. And it was kind of like the energy of the beginning part, right, with the panther. It's like, I feel like, because when Frodo went into that sort of cave or tunnel, it's like he did have sort of a negative response to Sam, right? Like a flare up of anger, perhaps, saying like if you're not coming with me, like to just leave, like go and do your own thing. And so Sam ended up like leaving. They ended up having some sort of separation. But I feel like this coming out at the end is kind of like, because I see these hands as like pulling them out, where it's like, I do think that they are recognizing or coming to recognize that your insight was correct, and that they are sort of needing assistance in coming out of whatever this potentially dangerous situation. Potentially risky. It's not dangerous. I don't think there's any sort of threat on their life or their safety. It's more so something that was like, had the potential to end up in a tower moment, is basically how I'm going to leave it. And then finally you have the Emperor, right? So where they were starting from is the King of Pentacles, which is very much sort of stable and secure and all that. But the Emperor is a more embodied version of who they are, is kind of how I want to put it. Like very much stable, like they're not standing on antlers anymore. They're very sort of secure in themselves. So whatever this situation was, it allowed them to sort of level up, is what I'm going to say, into the Emperor. And then there's now sort of this 10 of Cups moment between you. So it doesn't have to be like a partner. It could just be like a friend, and then returning to sort of that state of harmony and happiness, like growing this vision together, sustaining your relationship, all of this sort of like happy, stable energy is kind of how this is feeling. Okay, Cancer. I'm going to leave it there for the message. I'm going to move to the extended, and we're going to talk about what's something that you can focus on and where's an area of growth. The link for that is in the description box below. I do have other videos if you're interested in checking those out. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.